Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's the creator, host, cameraman, editor, culinary director for the YouTube channel, Not Another Cooking Show. He has worked with national brands and has a modern grandma cooking style. He hails from Brooklyn, New York, and is teaching the world how to cook. Please welcome to the show, Stephen Cusato. Stephen, ciao, my man.
Thank you for having me. What a great little intro. Made me feel like I was on a radio show or something.
Welcome to the show. Let me kick off here. Where did your love of food come from? Was it from family? Was it from Food Network? Was it something from your childhood? Where did that come from?
It's a little bit of everything. Like, food is a weird thing because it's not like, you grew up with a family of musicians and it's like a weird thing that not everyone does, or, like theater people, or like everyone has food in their lives from like the day they're born till the day they die. And they have to like involve themselves with it like 2-3 times a day. So I grew up like most people who just, obviously everyone loves food. You know what I mean? There's like the rare, like, meathead who just like uses it as fuel. Right. You know what I mean? They're like, I don't care how it tastes. It just fuels my body. But for the most part, like most people derive joy from food. So like, holidays, stuff like that. A lot of food memories that are prevalent with me were like boardwalk meals, like going to eat like fish by the beach, you know what I mean? And the batter, like these very like, there's still flavors today, like battered fries, like have you ever had like a battered French fry? There's like this seasoning in it that just takes me to the beach, you know what I mean? So it's just like things like that are pretty prevalent to me. But one of the main things is I loved watching it. Right. So there was a diner in my town called Bob's Cup and Saucer growing up, so my parents would take me and my brother on like the weekends and we would sit at not like a booth. Sometimes we would, but I always be sad because I always liked sitting at the counter.
Yeah. Right.
So, that felt more like the counter dining or eating experience is like a world of a difference than sitting down at a table. It's like a whole different environment, a whole different vibe there that I always liked. And you get to watch what the short order cooks are doing, how people move. Like when somebody's good at their job, especially those diner type people, they it's interesting to watch. Like they have a way of moving, and I would just like stare and like you still remember like picking up little things, right? And when growing up with my brother, we shared a room, and every night I remember Food Network was like just becoming a thing. Back then it was very much what like YouTube channels were in like the last like decade, right? Like Bobby Flay was like in a set that was falling apart, trying to figure out how to be a television personality and like not being great at it at first, you know what I mean? And so it was a real kind of like by the bootstrap operation, which now that I reflect upon is kind of like relatable. And we would fall asleep every night to Iron Chef Japan. So, it was the overdubbed, really exaggerated, like almost making fun of itself kind of show. But I loved it. You know what I mean? Like it was on every night. So we could lie in bed and my brother and I had a TV, and, back in the day, the TV came with 30 channels, right? So it was like most of it was garbage and you maybe watched MTV, VH1, like Cartoon Network and the Food Network, you know what I mean? And so, so that, it was just like watching food when my mom would prepare holidays. Holidays were always big in my family. So I didn't ever I was never really like a part of it, but I would always like watch. And I was always fascinated by watching. And I even still today, when I learn, I have to see. I'm very visual, right? Like I'll learn just from watching somebody move. Like right now I'm really into pizza, right? So I'm just watching like on YouTube. I just get suggested all these videos of like a pizza shop somewhere in the world. No voiceover, no music or anything, just the line of like stretching the dough, preparing the pizza, throwing, just watching the movement, you know what I mean? And you just pick up so much when you just kind of absorb like a sponge with what everyone's doing. And I like kind of do that through my life, right? These little things like Food Network, for example. I never like took one of the recipes one of their people presented and like made them, but it was like a thing, one little like thing that most people probably like looked over, like the way they did something or how they, cut a thing, or a little tip that they added that was just like, there's a kind of like changes the way you cook. And it's just a lifetime of those moments sort of, you arrive one day at like your identity, right? Mm-hmm. You figure all these little things have kind of been piled together to create your style, or like how your point of view on food. And it's what makes you unique, right? So it's like, I always sort of try and pay attention to that kind of stuff and let it guide me, you know what I mean? Wherever I'm particularly interested in, I just kind of go that way.
You're very good at your channel of explaining and giving tips, and we're going to get there. But I want to give my listeners some background on who Steven Cusato was. Who were you when you were attending Bronxville High School? What type of kid were you?
Oh, good question. Very different. Like the kid I was in high school, and then the kid I was in college, and then the kid I was in my 20s, and the kid I am now. All very different people. That phase was like a very, it was a very, I was very like unsure of myself. The big thing for me in high school was football. I loved football, and I wasn't a very big person. So like I remember sophomore year, you play and, you get like beat up, and you're like you're the hazed newcomer on the team. I remember you don't get much shot junior year, but I worked hard, and, at the end of the year, I had a couple shots, and I made do with it. And then senior year, I was voted captain, and, nice. Really tried to be like a bulldog, you know what I mean? I was still a little guy, but, I wanted to make sure that by the end of the season, nobody ran to my side as a defensive back. So I just like take the kneecap out, you know what I mean? And
that'll do it.
I was very much like the jock, captain of the football team, not douchey, you know what I mean? Like I was very like subtle, and I liked that role, that like leadership role that I was able to have. But it wasn't really me. I was like preppier. And, I just like kind of felt, I was like kind of closed, or like kind of becoming a part of just the environment that I was in. It wasn't really like, I didn't know who I was. You know what I mean? Most people go through their whole lives not knowing who I was. So like in high school, you don't know who you are, but like, I just felt like I was like wanted to be something else. And so like after that, I remember the turn was in like senior year, smoked cigarettes halfway through like lunch break, and my baseball coach saw me once, and he like suspended me from the team for a week. And I had like worked with the younger kids all winter, like training them, like being a leader, being like, you better make me captain. I was like, I've been on the team for 4 years. There weren't even a lot of kids in my grade on the team. And so he never made me the captain, and then suspended me. And I was just like, this guy. And I quit the team, and then just became like smoked pot, smoked cigarettes, like got ready for college, where, just like I would, be free and everything. But I also like I would also study my ass off in college. Like I got diagnosed with ADD and dyslexia in freshman year of high school. And so I went from like a DC student, because I just like, I was slow, like reading was harder for me, all that, to like a high honor roll student in high school. But like, I was also on Adderall, and Adderall is like a performance enhancing
Right.
study drug. You know what I mean? And so when I got into college, I kind of like wanted to learn. I was like history. I was like, I don't. When I was in high school, I didn't want to learn it, but like now I'm like, what happened? You know what I mean? So it's like things were interesting to me then. So like and I was also on academic probation, meaning like my grades were good, but like I was bad at tests. I think I took the SAT, the ACTs. I never even took the SATs, and I did fine, but like I took them twice, 5 hours each time, and I did worse the second time. Like, what a grueling task to sit there for 5 hours when reading is like words just jumble up in your head, and like they make these convoluted like reading. So if Sally bought 5 cars and Johnny had a driveway that fit 20, it's like it's just so stupid. And so like
just stab yourself with toothpicks.
Yeah. And I'm just a visual learner. It's like I need to see things and touch and do. And so I just really quickly learned like I have to teach myself everything, because like the teacher is not necessarily going to be there to who's going to identify with me or be able to communicate to me. So after college, like I learned how to start a business. I went into advertising. That was a dying thing. I couldn't like get a raise or move my way up. I was right in 2008 financial crisis, right? So like my whole generation started with like a little bit lower. And eventually I was just like, you got to make your own way, right? So started a food truck with my brother and another guy, and we did that, and that was a good learning experience. I kind of cut my chops. He's a French Culinary Institute graduate. He had worked in top restaurants, so he had the real formal training. I was very much like a intuitive. I had a good culinary sense, but I just needed a little bit of experience. So doing that cut my chops. I was able to run the cart by myself and be in the shits and be almost like have fun with it. You know what I mean? Like the act of getting in trouble became fun. You know what I mean? Because then you have to dance.
Sure.
The whole thing that I loved. And
let me stop you right there for a second. Let me ask you something about that food truck, because you did the Food Freaks grilled cheese food truck. And for listeners, everybody wants to have a taco truck or a food truck. How difficult is that business?
Well, I will have a biased answer because in New York City, it is particularly difficult.
Okay.
Which is like a counterintuitive thing. You think, well, there's 8 million people in 8 miles. You know what I mean? That sounds like a gold mine, but it's the fact of that density that actually is a inhibitor of success, because then you have regulators who are like, well, how close are you to a building? And the restaurant is annoyed. And, this, that, and the other thing. And we had a parks department permit, and we could only be at certain parks. And then when we wanted to go to certain places, we were restricted. And it was just, there's a reason, if you're around New York City these days, there's a reason like you don't really see them like you used to, like the trendy ones, like the conceptualized ones, like they just don't exist anymore. Because at least in New York City, because it's so hard, but you go to LA, you go down to Miami, you go even in Westchester, where I'm from, I know food trucks that have booming businesses, with even taking the winter off. So it's like literally, it can be done. It's not easy. It's fun when you're in the truck selling a lot.
Okay.
But if it's cold and you're not, or you know what I mean? You have to clean up before and after. Like, it's a thing that just never ends. And so, if you're cut from that cloth, there are some people. I don't consider myself a chef. I could place myself in the environment and get by, but like the longevity of it would get to me, like it did with the food truck. But some people, that they're cut from that cloth, and they want to just be in it, and they want to do their own thing. And if you're like a young chef who's just like, doesn't see their path forward in like a restaurant or something, but you've got something to say, and you got a head of, a brain on your shoulders, like it's a viable way to start something, right? Or for me, like it was a stepping stone. Like I don't get to where I am today if I don't do that part of my story.
What did that teach you then?
Besides like the skill of cooking and like becoming confident in my own palate, like being able to talk to the two chefs I was working with and being like, this needs more acidity, right? Like that, like trusting my own judgment because it was my business, right? Like, you're not like here to like play with feelings, like say what you feel. And then when they're like, you know what, I think you're right. It's like, oh, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm beginning to know what I'm talking about. And so like, it was a lot of that, but a big problem with the business is my skills. I didn't have the skills necessary at the time to fully be successful at that business. And I was aware of it. Like at the time, being able to like code, right? Like to build your own website. I was like into content before it was really a thing. Like I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like building a website is frustrating for me because I'm now building a business and I want to grow both of them. Right. And so like now I can't even market my food truck because I'm working on it all day because my brother's prepping the food and my other partner is like doing other stuff that needed to be done around town. You know what I mean? Like operations type stuff. And we were doing like catering too. So like drop off. So like, you know, you start to realize like how you have these vast dreams, right? Of like what this can become, but you quickly become restrained by like the mere act of the daily grind of the business, right? So you have to just make sure like sandwiches get sold first before anything else happens. And so, you know, that was the thing. Like I left that business being like, I need to now, like, I can't be reliant on people, right? Like I was here. Like one of my partners was the operations guy because my brother, who was a fantastic at what he did, but like, he just wasn't like, his skill is not like the operational. At the time, it wasn't operationally running. It was more like he was an ace up at the sleeve with an ability to create flavors and sandwiches that nobody else was making. So, you know, I needed that skill because I didn't have it. So, and you know, that's one of 100 skills that I didn't have that I needed. So, you know, like going forward, I was like, this next decade, I was just going to be like downloading from the matrix. Like, what are the skills you need? Figure them out, learn them, and become good at them. And I didn't know what I needed to do, but like when I closed the food truck, you know, somebody asked me to, in my old ad agency, would I take photos for like this hummus brand's social media? So I was like, yeah. And so I like took my phone. I did I set up a crudité for 4th of July with the hummus in the center, and I just took a photo. I sent it to them, and they paid me like $250. And I was like, So I had a real camera because I started a blog called The Food Freak when I was working in advertising before the food truck to kind of get it going. I kind of used that to start my brand. And the thing about it is I took like 50 photos, like step-by-step photos of a dish, like the visual, like trying to like find my way of the recipe of doing a recipe. So, yeah, so I had the camera. And so then I was like, I can't use my phone anymore because that's cheap. I need to like figure out how to use a camera properly and take these photos and like actually become a food photographer. And so like I learned the ISO, aperture and shutter speed on a camera. And I learned about lighting. That's all you really need to know. And you just have to have like a certain taste, right? Or a certain, like having your eyes open to seeing the world. Like how does a tree look if I tilt my head here or there, or where's the light? And you start to like realize your eyes are cameras. So I can practice being a photographer all day long. And so like I got good at that, figuring out how to manipulate a camera a certain way to control it, then control lighting, and then from there learn video. And so now I'm like, I got pushed down the path and I'm starting to figure out the skills I need, right? I like the camera, so let's figure out that skill. But now video is a thing, and I have the camera skill. These are crossover. I could easily learn video if I'm good at photo. So then I learned video, and then this whole time I'm like gaining a few clients in like this world, a little production company that I have. Like I'll make content for you. I have the infrastructure. I know you don't, and I know you need content. So what do you need? Recipes? Let's make recipes. Let's make good recipes so you have good customers so they want to make your product more often. And, you know, that's a good pitch, but like I would make the content, give it to them, and then they wouldn't know what to do with it. And so, you know, they'd pay me and they'd be like, I'm not seeing a lot of return, you know, even though your content's good, because they don't know how to like boost it on Facebook at the time. You know, they got to spend the money and they're like, what do we do it? It was a really confusing time for marketing, I felt like. And so, you know, I would gain a big client, lose a big client, gain a big client, a bigger client, lose it. And eventually I had a pasta brand that was, you know, pastas are regional. So like the one pasta could be put into like 4 different brands of boxes that are regional brands throughout the country. Okay. But the same pasta isn't the same. So like I would work for one of these brands and then do the content for all of those regional brands. And it was like more money I ever made in my life per month to do it. And I was like, I finally made it. And this was like the end of the year in 2017. And at the time I'm also engaged, and I'm like 6 months away from getting married. And that, you know, my business is finally, this is like years of like trying to figure it out. I'm like, I think I'm there, you know what I mean? And then it was like November of 2017, the company hired like a new VP of marketing, right? And if you know what that means, that's like a death stroke to any current activity that you're doing. So they froze all marketing activity. So
you're out.
And I was like, that, you know, I had a small client basically like paying me like $2,000-$3,000 a month. That wasn't cutting it. And then a month later, January 2018, my engagement broke up. And so then I moved back home and was in the shits. And then about, I think February, like a few weeks of like depressive, sleeping in bed, you know, wanting to die. I was reading a book where it was like people who were doing businesses on the internet that were just like they're not stupid businesses, right? They obviously weren't stupid because they turned out to be successful, but like you're reading it being like, what? Like, how does this become a business? Right. And, you know, it was all YouTube stuff, social media, all that kind of branding. And you know, I just like thought, I was like, you know, I'm sort of built for this. Like I look back, I was like, I've done things. I had the experience of the food. I have an opinion on the food. I have production capabilities now and experience, and I'm not like, I'm like 31 or 32 at the time. I'm not a young idiot anymore. Like I have something to offer. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, now it was you know, a few years later, I've got skills that I didn't have earlier. I have a new confidence. Like, even though I was really not happy, I was in a bad place, but like I had a weird confidence, right? Like once I said I was going to do this, and, you know, I'm telling my parents, you know, people in my life who know they're like,
what did they say?
You know, they're like, some people are like, you're going to ruin your life. Like, you know, they think you're going to like, you know, cause I got nothing, right? Like there's no,
you're going to start a business on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. When you've got literally nothing. And so, but I just knew it would work, right? Like I didn't have bills. I had a cell phone, you know, stuff I could handle. I'd have to rent, right? My parents were supportive. I was like, I need the kitchen, and I need it like 1 or 2 times a week. And like, I kind of need it wholly, right? Like it's kind of connected to like a living room.
Okay.
Like if you could just find something to do for these moments of the day.
I need you gone.
Great. Yeah. Or go upstairs, buzz off. Like I get, this is going to be good for us. And so they were really good about that. And the kitchen was like, it turned out to be perfect for a perfectly manageable place to produce. Like the ceiling was a little lower, so it felt bright. Everything was white. Everything just worked, right? So like that made it fun to shoot in. And it just sort of came together, it was just fun to build, right? You're like, even to this day, like I get overwhelmed now with decisions. Like I'm kind of fascinated by them. Like your life is just all these like millions of decisions, and like they take you, even with a video, right? Like I can decide like, how do I put it on this plate? Do I do it this way or that way of it? And like each decision changes it, and it makes it more you, or like more like this other, you know what I mean? And it's like, there were all these decisions you would make, whether it was plating on a cutting board in the beginning of my show, for all the horrible photos that like brown on brown that it created, because I like was stuck to this aesthetic. It also brought people to the channel because people were like, why are you plating on the cutting board? Like, so it was, it was a weird decision that like some people hated, but it brought other people, it caught other people's attention. And so like, it was just all of these little things you decide to do or you decide not to do that sort of help shape whatever it is you do. And, I'm still doing that today, right? Like it's
right
process of eliminating or adding or analyzing. And it almost gets harder and harder.
This is my story. No symptoms to being diagnosed with colon cancer, which led to 4 surgeries and a 50-50 survival rate. It then spread to my liver, in which only 3% are caught in time. Now, a 1% chance it ever comes back. And I'm on the road to inspiring everyone, because you have 3 choices: live, die, or fight. Bernie Siegel said, no matter what the statistics say, there's always a way. To book me, Tommy Canale, to speak to your event or group, go to TommyCanale.com. That's TommyCanale.com. And get ready to be inspired to inspire others, because you're one day away from changing your life. Click the link in the show notes. Listeners, let me bring you up to speed on the success of this channel, and go to the show notes. I'm going to put a link to the channel. And if you're listening to this, obviously you're into food, and if you're not into food, I have to question why you're not into food, but go to the show notes and click the link. He started the channel in 2018. It now has over 850,000 subscribers and almost 70 million views. You heard that correctly. 850,000 subscribers and almost 70 million views. It is outstanding. The content is good. Steven is excellent at breaking down stuff. If you see something that's the title and you go, I can't cook that or I can't make that, I challenge you to watch the show and then go, you know what, I think I can probably make that, because he breaks it down and gives you tips on how to make these things. Steven, one of my questions is, how long does it take you to actually film it, make the product, put it together before you post it?
I mean, the actual filming could take as little as like an hour, depending on what it is. I mean, if I'm making a pasta, say I were to just shoot Cacio e Pepe.
Okay.
It's grating cheese, toasting peppers, grinding peppers, cooking the pasta, throwing it all together in a pot and marrying it together. That process takes 20 minutes, right? So if you extrapolate that to like the filming and setting up cameras and this, that, and the other thing, let's call it an hour. I mean, that's a very simple, easy video to do. It doesn't take much time. Probably edit it fairly quickly. But like there was so much research done into like a video like Cacio Pepe, because there's so many mistakes to be made, right? So a lot of the time involved are like, a lot of what I like to do now, and I didn't used to do this, but when I say I'm going to approach making, what is it? Like a crab cake,
okay,
which I did recently. I will make it very haphazardly first, like almost like put something on and watch it and make it, like be distracted, try not to make it, try to replicate like the mistakes somebody at home might make who's careless, right? Like whether it is, you know, I paid attention, I wasn't paying attention, or, you know, I stepped away, or, you know, I just didn't cut something the right way. You know what I mean? Like I just try and like imagine where somebody might screw this up. And it came from like, you know, getting the comments, like when I used to make videos, people would, I'd see the same comments over and over again. So I'd be like, oh, people just, the root problems with certain recipes are pretty like universal, right? So if you can figure out what the root cause or where like the pitfalls are of these recipes and preempt them, then your video, you're not going to get those comments, like, and your video will be more effective. And, you know, it's hard when you make a video and you get the comment, you're like, oh yeah, you're right. That's kind of obvious. And like, you can't redo it. Or maybe you have to wait a little bit and redo it, right? So I'm trying to figure out how to make it as comprehensive as possible. So I'm hoping to make it 2-3 times before I film it and screw it up. Like I don't want to screw it up on the channel and pose it off as like, you know, like, oh, we're learning together. Because it's like, I should be learning first so that I can give you a better, more accurate way of doing this. Because at the end of the day, the goal of my show was rooted in like when I was involved, when I was in my old relationship, we would entertain a lot. We loved doing it and we were good at it. I was back of the house, she was front of the house, and people would come over and be like, I can never do what you're doing. I mean, I'm making chicken cutlets. Like this, I'm not making chefy things. It's very much simple, classic dishes, but I really like, I have a vision in my head of how I want them. Like as an old picky eater, like I have certain ways that I envision things and I just trying to achieve that. And so the show is like anyone who ever like went into a house, into my apartment or whatever, and ate from me and was like, I can never do that. That person who has that mentality where like they just tell themselves, I can't do it. Like, I want you to watch my video and by the end of it being like, hey, I can do that.
That's exactly
like,
right.
I want it to be so like, it's not even, sometimes I question how clear I say things. I don't even know if it's the clearest at times, but it is a specific way to convey something, right? Like whether it's not a dumbed down way or more like common way of understanding something rather than an esoteric way.
Let me go back to the Cacio de Pepe, because in that episode, you showed not one, but multiple ways to make that dish. I've struggled with that dish, and you said something that absolutely made it easier for me to make it when you said the pecorino romano has to be like snow. And mine wasn't that fine, and I was getting those lumps when I was making it. And ever since you made that comment of the cheese has to be like snow, the lumps have gone away. It just changed it. So when you start talking about that, I can relate to that, because that's what I'm trying to tell you, people. Don't get freaked out by the title and go, I can't make that. If you just listen and watch, I'm telling you, he breaks it down for you to where you can do that. And if you can't make the first way that he shows you, is it 3 or 4 different ways you show how to make cacio di pepe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just fascinated by like methods, right? Like a lot of what I try and do is be more of a translator than I am to like be a showy offy kind of chef, right? Like I'm more interested in being somebody who communicates better. Ironically, like a lot of the problem in like past relationships of mine is poor communication, which I imagine most men probably can relate to. But to me, I was like, I'm aware of that, but like, there's gotta be a way to communicate recipes better. Mm-hmm. It is the inherent flaw, whether like it's such a cliche thing to say from somebody like me that like my goal is to like make sure more people cook or like help people cook better. But like nobody is actually living up to that, right? Like the reason my videos, the people who watch my videos appreciate them is because I say things that most people brush over. Or I show things that they skip over, whether it's to hide a mistake that they're self-conscious about or like, who knows? But like for me, I want you to see everything the way that I used to want to see everything when I was growing up. when I was watching, the Short Order Cook or Iron Chef, or the reason why I got mad at Food Network later in life, when they wouldn't show me what I wanted to see, and instead they're just panning, smiling faces. You know what I mean? Like I remember watching, being like, they're making something and they're like doing something on the board and they're not talking. So it's like a B-roll shot, but they're not showing me the thing. They're showing me the host. I'm like, I don't care about the host, right? Like I'm watching this because of the food. Show me what they're doing. And it just made me realize how lost like that style of content is it's so devoid of any soul. Right? It is a person in front of a camera making a thing, and that's it.
Does it make a difference? And it hasn't for me, but I'm wondering if you get these kind of comments of, do I have to have the same type of pans you're using or use the same type of stove you're using? Or I live in Colorado, which is a different altitude. Do you get these kind of comments, or people are trying to replicate exactly what you're using?
If the pan is important, I try to make it part of the video.
Yes, you do.
Like Philly cheesesteaks. The tools are fairly important. Like, sure, could you make it with other tools? Yeah, but like, when I make something like a Philly cheesesteak, I'm trying to replicate the environment in which an actual Philly cheesesteak is made. And so, they when you make a restaurant, like you worry about, you're concerned about the tools because they will make they will help you achieve the thing you're envisioning making. And so like, if that matters, I'll try and make it a thing. With regard to like, if somebody's in Colorado with altitude and like boiling water and stuff like that, part of me will get overwhelmed if I try to imagine everybody's micro environment.
Makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because I'm already trying to communicate so much in a very short amount of time. And I often forget things. Like I just did an artichoke video and I wanted to talk about buying artichokes and somebody mentioned it. And I've talked about that prior. I usually talk about how to pick the ingredient out in a supermarket. But I just forgot. Because like there's just so much to say, you know what I mean? When I started voicing over and stopped having to like rely on saying everything right in front of camera, you realize you could say so much about a recipe if you just think about it, right? So like a lot of my process, you said back to how long it takes me to make, is not rushing through the video anymore. So I may take 4 days on a video and shoot it and then let it simmer and then do a voiceover and then sleep and then come back and be like, that fix the voiceover, make it better.
Right.
You know what I mean? I have a better way of saying it. Like I'll be lying in bed and I'll find the right analogy or like phrasing, right? I'm big into comedy, big comedy guy. And what I find fascinating about stand-up comedy or funny things in general that are said is that they require, and this is very much like a YouTube thumbnail, a YouTube title. If the words aren't in the perfect order and said the right way, the joke won't hit, right? If they use the wrong words, if they're not, structured in the right place, it just won't work. But what's the genius of a comedian is every word they use is the right word. It's in the right place and it's just delivered in the right way. Right. So it's Correct. That kind of thing matters. And it's the same with like recipes too. It's like, it's like the order in which things are added matter. Right. So it's like, you may be like taking more time in a video to test it. Be like, if I screw around with the order, does that change it? You know what I mean? Like there's all these little nuance to everything, right? Whether it's the voiceover, to how you wanted to present the recipe. It just becomes like an overwhelming amount of decisions, but it's a fun thing.
What is one, in your opinion, easy kitchen tip that you could give our listeners that maybe they're not using that they need to be doing?
The one thing that I would probably assume most people do wrong, or if there's two things, is they are scared of using high enough heat and they don't use enough salt.
I'm guilty of the second one for sure.
High heat is my favorite. I don't care about the fire alarm. I don't know if you can see it. There is a shower. There's a shower cap on top of my fire alarms because I'm not concerned so much as I am about like whether I can use high heat in my house or not. And if you can use high heat, like pan searing broccoli or roasting at a high temperature, getting the sugars and caramelizing things, getting color on things, and then you season it properly, like you're already the cook you need to be. Like cooking is not much. Like if you go to the farmer's market and you take a head of broccoli or butternut squash and you take it home and you cut it and you throw it into like a 450, 500 degree oven and you just put enough oil on it and you salt it. You salt it generously, not over salt. When I say that, salty means it doesn't taste salty, right? As soon as
Correct.
it tastes salty, you've over salted. But if it doesn't taste like anything, you've undersalted. If it's bland, if it's flat, it should. When you've hit the right amount of salt, the thing tastes like it's like exploding with flavor. And so, you know, a lot of what I do, and sometimes what makes it hard to make interesting videos is like I just go to the farmer's market and I take a vegetable and I put olive oil on it and salt and I roast it in a hot pan or a hot oven and it's perfect. You know what I mean? Like that's not fun. It's not that it's not fun. It's not interesting. It's not flashy. It's not what people want to hear. But like some people don't have access to farmers markets. You know what I mean? So you got to give certain, you got to do other things, but it's also like maybe a lot of the problem with that people don't have access to the ingredients that I cook with is because they don't demand it. Go to your Walmart in the middle of wherever you live in like, you know, Louisiana or Texas and demand aged balsamic vinegar or extra virgin olive oil imported from Italy. I don't even know if they have that or not, but if they don't, like you gotta bang it at the door, right? Do they have the vegetables you like? Do they have the condiments you like? Then you gotta make noise and tell them and your friends to like write emails and be like, we want this stocked in our local supermarket. You don't have Parmigiano Reggiano. You got the crap that Steve told me that you guys, the pre-shredded crap, you know what I mean? Like we know the jig is up. Like we want better stuff.
Right. Don't buy that stuff. And don't buy the stuff in the plastic, the Parmesan in the plastic container that you sprinkle on. No.
You know, that's the only way we got better stuff on the East Coast. Like, you know, there was a time in the 90s when all of our supermarkets probably looked like the supermarket on an East Coast looked the same as a supermarket in the middle of the country, right? Like now, like I know the ingredients I can get here in New York are better, especially the Italian ingredients are just better than any other place in the country, the whole Northeast, right? So, but like, you know, over time that should change. Like people, bakeries become popular, you know, local bakeries pop up. And if you can just, you know, make sure you make your voice heard by like your local supermarkets. Maybe you have a corner store that can just order the thing you need, right? Like stock it, be like, I'll buy it. Like just make, you know what I mean? So, and now what's also good is the internet. You can get a chunk of Parmigiano Reggiano vacuum sealed sent to your door. You know what I mean? It might cost you, but like, you know, treat it like gold. You know what I mean? Like that's what I do. It's like when I was broke and I had no money, I still spent all of it on food because I just prioritized it. I was like, okay, I got nothing but food and I can work with food and I can cook. So this is where I spend my money. This is where I get my joy, even if I have not a lot. And it's a decision I made, you know what I mean? So it's like, over time, things should just be better. Like access to all these ingredients should be more available. But for now, if you're in an area that doesn't have access to the things you want, then you got to kind of put a little work in and try and pull the place to you, you know?
In your opinion, I'm anxious to hear your answer. When should you and should you not be using pasta water?
For tomato sauce, if you make a pomodoro sauce, and, you know, you use a can of tomatoes or fresh tomatoes that have inherent amount of moisture and water in them. And then you spend however long you spend reducing the sauce down to like the right consistency that you want of a tomato sauce. And then you the idea of adding water to that after you just removed it or to thicken it, you've done all of that at this point. So with a tomato sauce, it is not necessary unless you over reduce it.
Makes sense.
Or you want to like stretch the sauce, you know what I mean? Like you don't have enough, right? But if you've got a perfect tomato sauce, right? Perfectly reduced, perfectly sweet, perfectly seasoned, basil, fresh, beautiful. Don't add pasta water. You don't need to. It's perfect, right? It's one of those things that just like I see a lot because somebody said pasta water always. And sometimes maybe the sauce is like, I see a lot of really thick tomato sauces. You know, like tomato sauce was one of those things where I was like, oh, if I can communicate the idea that tomato sauce is a reduction sauce, right? Like you would a steak sauce, then maybe people can have an aha moment, right? When they're saying my sauce was too thin or my sauce was too thick. It was like, no, you didn't cook it right. Right? It's not my problem your sauce is thin or thick. I'm telling you it's a reduction sauce. It is an act of concentrating the flavor of a tomato to the proper flavor concentration and consistency. So if yours is too thick or too thin, that's because you weren't cooking.
You could use pasta water in a Cacio with Pepe.
But when you need to form a sauce, pasta water helps, right? If you take butter, brown butter, and you want to make a brown butter sauce, the brown butter, you're gonna take pasta, throw it into the brown butter sauce, and it's gonna sort of be a little bit of water floating in butter, and it's not gonna be emulsified. If you then take the starchy part of the pasta water and you add it, that's gonna help the water emulsify with the butter, and then that sauce is gonna be, instead of like buttery and greasy, like a thicker consistency of a sauce. All of the Roman pastas, except for amatriciana, would use pasta water because amatriciana is a tomato sauce, right? So just it's the same principle of a tomato sauce applies. So it is one of those things that is like, it's most pastas that aren't tomato sauce probably require it. And then you have to be a judge of how much you add. Right. It is such a balancing game, an act, right? And it's like hard to teach because it is not it's not a measurement.
You're right.
You know what I mean? Like how high your heat is on the pan, how fast your sauce is reducing while you're melding the pasta, like that those are variables. Everything's a variable. So on some level, if you want to cook, like the thing that separates a home cook, like a master pasta cook, is an intuition to know when it's right. To know it needs just a little bit more pasta water, like that. It's the practice, right? Like a home cook can achieve that, right, with practice. But when you're starting out to make these pastas, you add a certain amount of pasta water to Cacio Pepe, and you're like, is it enough? Is that enough to the amount of cheese? Whereas like I am at the point where it's like I can see the water and the amount of cheese separately and be like, it's going to be enough. The difference, right? So you get there by doing it and screwing it up a lot of times, and then finding out the balance, right? The little touch, like it's like the grandma's touch, right? Like they just that energy that they just throw in there just makes it a little bit better, just because they're so confident, right? They've done it so many times. It's that the touch of confidence, like, seems to have do something.
What's your feelings of knowing that people are not only watching your channel and your videos, but they're making your recipes?
I think, to me, in the world of YouTube, there are people who do billions of views, right? So my channel is relatively small in terms of views compared to what YouTube is. But the thing I am most proud of is that I set out to make a channel that would actually get people to cook these things. When I knew that cookbook, you buy a cookbook, you don't really make anything from there. You watch cooking shows. It's sort of entertaining, but you're be like all that BuzzFeed stuff, right? Like you never really can make it. It's just flashy and it's like entertaining for the eye. So to be able to make something that people wanted to watch and that they liked, but then also would make the things. Like that to me is what drove me for so long, right? In the beginning when things were tough, that just knowing that was like so powerful, right? Like especially holiday recipes. Like I have a little cookbook I sell at the holidays. It's a digital thing, but it is like all of the recipes from my family, grandma's recipes, cookies we worked on for years trying to figure out all these things that like when I sit there on like Thanksgiving or Christmas and I look at my mom, like, you know, like there's people all over the place like making this shit right now.
That's pretty
cool.
It's
like that is, you know, you feel like you're in people's home, like all these people's homes, and like and they're sharing something that means something to you. It's the coolest part of the job by far. You know what I mean? Like when I see people post what they made and it's, you know, the pasta looks like a restaurant, like pro level. It's just it's the coolest thing ever. And it makes me want to be better, right? Like it's what
fuels you.
I keep thinking every year. I think less like I think the more I think I'm not good enough. Like I got to get better. You know what I mean? Because you know, it's just like you're always worried it just goes away. You know what I mean? Every month I'm worried it goes away. So it's like I just can't feel comfortable, even though like I know people like it and they're making a thing. It's like it's gotta always get better and evolve. And I'm restricted. Like my biggest problem is figuring out how to bring on people to help me do that. I look at a lot of colleagues and like they've got teams built out and people, it's like the right person, right? Like just the right person who knows how to do the thumbnail or shoot the video, right? Like they've got them. And I'm like, I can't find that right person, right? In New York, when you find a good talent, they move real fast, right? Good talent finds a way to get to a better opportunity, right? Somebody, a bigger YouTuber who can pay them more, you know what I mean? And so it's really hard to like find somebody who's really good and then keep them. Because the scariest thing for me is to find somebody I'm reliant on and they leave and then I'm screwed. So it's like that now it's like this whole idea of like, how do I make things better when I'm starting to feel like I can't do it. I can't get them the videos where I necessarily want them to be alone anymore. And so like a lot of what I'm trying to do is spend time figuring out how to even do that. You know what I mean? Communicating the recipe to the audience is one thing, but then communicating how my whole process that I've like routinely done for 5 years to like another person, to have them come in and like change the style of how like I edit on a timeline. You know what I mean? Cause like they do it properly and I do it like a weirdo, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's all these things that are scary when you grow. And I'm not good at that part. I've worked alone for over a decade. And so the idea of like bringing people on, it's like, I don't even know, like, what do you tell them to do? Like, I don't even, I'm like I just want them to like know all these things that are in my head and be like, yeah, go start I want to do Patreon more. I want to like figure out how to like offer real Patreon content. And figure out how to blow that out and be like, just do it. Whatever you need, just tell me, but like, just go do it.
Just go do it.
I'm not going to hold your hand, but you got to do it. And it's also got to be good. So it's like, I don't know how to like, it's to some people that must be like a really freeing thing, right? Like if you know how to manage this world of content, right? And I say, we got to make this thing. I want to do a show. Like, let's figure out concepts and let them live on Patreon and let's put value there. You know, it's either a scary thing or a really fun thing, but it's like, I just need people who just like understand like why you would even want to do that. You know what I mean? And like who successful Patreons who are offering content, like that is a huge business in and of itself. Right. So it's like diversifying, finding ways of not being so heavily reliant on the ebb and the flow of YouTube, because you see the analytics. Like I don't see brand deal analytics or whatever. Like YouTube, you see like an up and down all year. And so all that does is screw with your mind.
Absolutely.
Right. Because like I'm doing much better than I did last year, but I'm in a worse mood than I am at now, which is a low point of the year. than I did last year at a low point. Because it feels like now the stakes are higher. So if I lose everything, that's, you know what I mean?
Yep. Makes sense.
So it's not like you're feeling more comfortable as you grow older. You're like, oh, this has got to be, I'm 5 years, right? Everything comes to an end. So it's like you're always on the edge of worrying about that. But you try and just make it through, and you try and just get better every day.
What is it about Pastina that just makes you feel better and cures when you're sick, it's Pastina. When you feel something coming on, it's Pastina. And what is it about that?
I think it's because you can fit so much in the bowl that, like, as a kid, the idea of a soup is like, it's water, right? You're not filling up. Like, it's hard to fill up on a soup. But if you get a bowl of pastina, right? And you like pastina per square inch of spoonful is like a pretty substantial bite.
Yeah, you're right.
To like, a piece of chicken, carrot, onion with a spoonful of broth. So as a kid, you feel like you're getting gypped when you get like a chicken soup, but pastina is like, I have pasta in broth. And I don't know, man. There's something about that. But that's what I'm saying. It's that simple thing that, like, if you didn't grow up pastina, you passed pastina, that box of pastina in the grocery store your whole life, being like, well, who's using that? And what do you do with it? And then you figure that out, and then you're like, oh, this is so simple. If I'm sick, like, especially if you're sick, like, and you need to feed yourself, you're like a single person, right? Like, you don't have somebody to make you a chicken noodle soup from scratch. You pour a little broth in the pan, you pour a little pastina, a little olive oil, a little cheese, and you feel like grandma just fed you. So it's like, it's accessible, right? Where chicken noodle soup requires some know-how, pastina is anyone can make.
And right now there's listeners going, what are they talking about? Pastina? I'll put a link in the show notes, folks. You can go and I'll give you Steven's direct recipe to grandma's pastina and the adult version of pastina, and you'll figure it out. I'm telling you.
You got to start with the kiddie version,
right,
and then evolve. So
you got to graduate. Steven, man, thanks so much for being on the show, taking time out of your editing and your channel and everything and talking with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, man. It was fun talking.
Folks, follow me on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. And if you'd like to buy me a glass of vino, well, that's easy. Go to beforethelightspod.com and click on Buy Tommy a Glass of Vino. That's beforethelightspod.com. Click on Buy Tommy a Glass of Vino. We'll give you a shout out on the show. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.